The year is 1970. America is loud, gas is cheap, muscle cars rule the streets, factory drag racing is a religion, horsepower wars are being fought in showrooms from coast to coast, and Pontiac is about to build an engine that feels like a final, defiant scream. Turn the key. The starter groans for a half second. Then 8 cylinders wake up with a deep, slow thunder that shakes the pavement beneath you. The idle isn't smooth, it lopes, it rumbles. The whole car vibrates like something caged. This isn't a high-revving screamer. It doesn't need to be. This engine doesn't rush, it overpowers. Put your hand on the fender, you can feel it through the metal. That's 455 cubic inches of displacement telling you it's awake. But what almost nobody realizes is this. The Pontiac 455 HO didn't die because it was weak. It didn't die because it was outdated. It didn't die because someone built something better. It died because it was too powerful at the exact wrong moment in history. And once you understand why, you'll never look at the end of the muscle car era the same way again. Most people think Pontiac's fall was sudden, like someone flipped a switch. Emissions laws, insurance hikes, the oil crisis, game over. But the real story is more brutal, more tragic, and far more complicated, because Pontiac engineers saw the future coming. They read the writing on the wall before anyone else did. They tried to fight it, and the 455 HO was their last real weapon. To understand how it became a victim of its own strength, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to understand who Pontiac was, and why they built engines the way they did. By the late 1960s, Pontiac had already built a reputation for torque-heavy street monsters. Unlike Chevy or Ford, Pontiac didn't obsess over RPM. They didn't care about hitting 7,000 on a tachometer. Their engines were designed to pull, hard, right off idle. When other manufacturers chased peak horsepower numbers, Pontiac chased something else. They chased the feeling. That shove in your chest when the light turns green. That hook into the seat that makes your knuckles go white. That was the Pontiac philosophy. Power you could feel immediately, power that didn't wait. Then came the 455. Introduced in 1970, the Pontiac 455 was massive. A 4.15-inch bore paired with a 4.21-inch stroke. That long stroke is the key. It's what made this engine different from everything else on the market. See, a long stroke means the pistons travel farther with each revolution. Piston speed was high. Revs were modest. This wasn't an engine that wanted to spin to 7,000 RPM. But torque was absolutely savage. All 455 cubic inches of cast iron fury produced around 500 lb-ft of torque in early form. Let that sink in. 500 pound-feet at barely over 3,000 RPM in a street car. A car you could buy with a warranty. A car you could drive to work on Monday. You didn't need to floor it. You didn't need to wind it out. You just leaned on the throttle and the car surged forward like it was being pulled by gravity itself. This was torque you could feel in your spine, the kind that made passengers grab the door handle, the kind that turned rear tires into smoke machines on dry pavement. In 1970, Pontiac released the 455 HO high output. This wasn't a marketing badge slapped on for sales. This wasn't some dealer option. It was a serious mechanical upgrade built for serious drivers. The engine used round port cylinder heads borrowed from Pontiac's racing programs. These heads had been developed over years of competition. They weren't designed for economy. They weren't designed for quiet cruising. They were designed to flow air like nothing else on the street. Big valves, free-flowing exhaust ports, high-flow intake runners that let the engine breathe deep. The intake manifold was cast aluminum, lighter than iron, better heat dissipation. Every piece was chosen to maximize output. Compression was set at about 10.25.1, high but still streetable. You could run it on premium pump gas without issue. No race fuel required, no special preparation. Horsepower was rated at 360 horsepower gross, but anyone who's ever driven one knows that number was conservative. Pontiac was sandbagging. They knew insurance companies were watching. They knew the less impressive it looked on paper, the easier it would be to sell. But torque was the real headline. 500 lb-ft, enough to twist drive shafts in half, enough to destroy U-joints if the driver wasn't careful, enough to smoke bias ply tires at highway speeds without even trying. Drop this engine into a GTO, a Firebird Formula, or a Grand Prix, and you had something terrifyingly fast in the real world. Not just on a drag strip, on actual roads, in actual traffic, from actual stoplights. Quarter-mile times hovered in the low 13s, some dipped into the high 12s with traction, and that was with full interiors, power steering, air conditioning, and street tires. No gutted interiors, no slicks, no trailer queens. This was real-world performance, the kind of speed you could live with every day. But even as Pontiac was celebrating this monster, the walls were already closing in. Storm clouds were forming on the horizon, and the engineers who built this engine could see exactly what was coming. And then the real nightmare started. In 1971, the automotive world changed overnight. New emissions standards were coming down from Washington. The Clean Air Act had teeth now, and worse, manufacturers were forced to switch from gross horsepower ratings to net horsepower. Gross horsepower measured the engine on a stand with no accessories, no alternator, no power steering pump, no air cleaner, just raw output. Net horsepower measured everything installed, the way the engine actually performed in a car. Suddenly, the same engines looked weaker on paper. A 360 horsepower rating dropped to something in the 200s. The numbers looked pathetic, even though the engines themselves hadn't changed at all. But the changes weren't just cosmetic. The real damage was coming from emissions compliance. Pontiac engineers were told to lower compression ratios across the board. High compression meant higher combustion temperatures. Higher temperatures meant more NOx emissions, nitrogen oxides. And NOx was the new enemy. The government wanted it gone. So Pontiac dropped the 455 HO's compression from 10.25 swan down to around 8.41. On paper, it looked like a death sentence. The engine appeared neutered. Magazine writers were already writing obituaries for the muscle car. Horsepower fell to 335 net horsepower. Torque slipped slightly, but it was still enormous. Still well over 450 lb-ft in most configurations. Here's the part most people miss. Here's what the history books get wrong. Pontiac didn't give up. Instead of killing the engine, they refined it. They fought back with everything they had. The camshaft was redesigned from scratch. Valve timing was adjusted to keep cylinder pressure strong at low RPM. The engineers knew they couldn't keep the compression, so they made up for it with better airflow and smarter cam profiles. The round port heads stayed. The massive intake runners stayed. The Rochester Quadrajet carburetor stayed. In the real world, the 1971 and 1972 455 HO engines were still brutally fast. They still laid down rubber on command. They still scared passengers. They just didn't look impressive on a brochure. The power was still there. You just had to experience it to believe it. But now Pontiac had a bigger problem, one they couldn't engineer their way out of: insurance companies. By 1971, insurers had figured it out. Torque-heavy engines were destroying claims data. Young drivers were wrapping muscle cars around telephone poles. Medical claims were piling up. The actuaries were terrified. A 455 HO could break traction at 60 mph without trying, in second gear, on dry pavement. It could overpower drum brakes that were never designed for this kind of acceleration. It could overwhelm suspension designs that were meant for cruising, not launching. Premiums exploded. Some owners were being quoted more than $3,000 a year just to insure a GTO. That's over $20,000 in today's money for insurance alone, on top of the car payment, on top of the gas, on top of everything else. Young buyers, the exact market Pontiac was targeting, couldn't afford it anymore. The very people who wanted these cars were being priced out by their own insurance companies. Sales collapsed. Dealerships that couldn't give away muscle cars started ordering Venturas and Le Mans sedans instead. The performance market was dying in real time. And then came the final blow. The 1973 oil crisis. Arab nations embargoed oil to the United States. Gas prices spiked overnight. Lines formed at gas stations. People fought over fuel. Fuel economy suddenly mattered. And the 455 HO drank fuel like it was free. Single-digit miles per gallon wasn't unusual, especially in city driving, especially if you used the throttle the way the engine wanted you to. 7 miles per gallon, 8 on a good day, maybe 12 on the highway if you kept your foot out of it. Nobody wanted that anymore. Nobody could afford it. Pontiac knew the end was coming. The executives knew. The engineers knew. Everyone in Detroit knew. So they tried one last time. In 1973, they evolved the engine into the 455 Superduty. This was no longer just a street engine. It was overbuilt on purpose. It was a statement, a middle finger to the changing world. The block used thicker main webs to handle massive loads. Forged connecting rods replaced the weaker cast units. The crankshaft was reinforced at every stress point. Oil passages were revised to handle sustained high RPM operation. This engine was designed to survive racing abuse, not just a quarter-mile burst. Endurance, road racing, the kind of punishment that would destroy a lesser engine. Pontiac engineers wanted a motor that could be thrashed for hours without complaint. They wanted something bulletproof. In testing, the Superduty made well over 400 horsepower, despite being rated at just 310 net horsepower due to emissions equipment. The underrating was deliberate. Pontiac wanted to fly under the radar. They wanted insurance companies to ignore it. Torque was still monstrous, still pushing 400 lb-ft through the drivetrain, still enough to overwhelm the tires, still enough to make experienced drivers respect it. But the timing was wrong. Catalytic converters were looming on the horizon. Unleaded fuel was becoming mandatory. High-compression engines couldn't survive on the new fuel formulations. And emissions equipment strangled engines like this one. Only around 1/200 Pontiac 455 Superduty engines were ever built. That's it, 1,200. One of the rarest factory muscle engines of all time. They went into Trans Ams and formulas. Most were bought by racers who knew what they had. Some went to collectors who never drove them. A few went to regular buyers who just wanted the most powerful Pontiac they could get. By 1974, it was over. Pontiac ended production of all high-performance big block V8s. The 455 disappeared quietly. No ceremony, no press release, just silence. Tooling was scrapped. Blocks were melted down. Engineers were reassigned to economy car projects. And just like that, one of the most torque-rich engines ever put into a production car was gone. But here's the twist. The Pontiac 455 didn't fail because it couldn't adapt. It failed because it represented a philosophy the world no longer wanted. This engine wasn't about efficiency, it wasn't about balance, it wasn't about hitting some number on a spec sheet. It was about dominance. It delivered its power low, hard, and relentlessly, right where streetcars live, right where traffic lights and highway on-ramps happen. Modern engines chase horsepower numbers at high RPM. They need turbos to make torque. They need to scream at 6,000 RPM to feel fast. The 455 HO didn't care about revs. It cared about what happened the moment you touched the gas. That instant response, that gut punch acceleration, that feeling that something massive just woke up behind you. That kind of power scared regulators. It scared insurers. And eventually, it scared the market. Today, surviving 455 HO and Super Duty cars are legends. A real 1971 or 1972 455 HO GTO can sell for well over 6 figures. A documented matching numbers car can push $150,000 or more. A genuine 1973 Super Duty Trans Am can break the $300,000 mark at auction. These aren't just collectibles, they're time machines. Collectors don't just buy them for nostalgia. They buy them because nothing else feels the same. No turbo lag, no waiting for boost to build, No high-rev theatrics, no computer-controlled throttle response, just instant, unstoppable force, the way muscle cars were supposed to feel, the way they were designed to feel. The Pontiac 455 HO became a victim of its own power because it was built for a world that vanished too fast, a world where torque mattered more than emissions charts, where engines were judged by how hard they pushed you into the seat, not how clean they burned fuel, where nobody asked about carbon footprints or fuel economy ratings. It wasn't killed by bad engineering, it wasn't killed by better competition, it was killed by timing, by politics, by a changing world that no longer had room for machines like this, and that's what makes it unforgettable. The Pontiac 455 HO was the last roar of a dying era, the final statement from engineers who refused to surrender quietly, a monument to what happens when passion meets power, and both meet an unforgiving future. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of muscle car history's most misunderstood engines, let me know what story you want next. Another fallen giant, another forgotten rivalry, or another engine the world wasn't ready for. Make sure to subscribe, because the next story is even louder.